So I wanted to make this little video about my experience as a PhD student, a doctoral candidate at the London School of Economics in the UK, to tell you a little bit about what it was like, the experience that I had, and the kind of things that you might expect if you go and do a PhD in the UK in the social sciences. Obviously, the experiences that I've had are going to be really different to other people's. Even my friends, my colleagues are going to tell you a different story to the story that I'm telling you. But nonetheless, I think it can still be really insightful and really interesting just to get that inside scoop, that inside story of what it's really like. So I started my PhD program at the LSE in 2016 in September, and the first academic year felt a little bit like you might expect in a master's program. So we actually had to do substantive courses, we had to do theories courses, and we had to do methods courses, and we had to produce essays, the same as you would expect on a master's program, except a little bit more focused towards your own interests and the things that you really care about studying. The first year comes to its climax with your 10,000 word research proposal, in which you have to spell out the literature that you want to respond to, the methods that you want to use to respond to them, as well as talking about how you're going to manage your time over the coming 3 years to make the PhD process work. After you do this research proposal, you have to defend it in a Viva examination. That's an oral examination that takes, in my case, I think it was around an hour and a half. You're interrogated by a panel of 3 academics, your 2 supervisors and a chair, and they basically try and grill you on your ideas, really pick them apart, but in a useful way, in a way that's trying to get you to think about the things you've missed, about the things you might have to go back and reconsider. So in my opinion, and the opinion of many of my colleagues, the first year is the most stressful year. It's just something you have to power through, you have to get through it. After that, it gets a little bit better. From year 2 onwards, you're just kind of doing your own research. You actually get to put your ideas into practice. In my case, I was researching the gig economy in London, so platforms like Uber, Amazon Flex, and Airbnb, and I was interviewing people who use these platforms as a way to earn a living. And I found it really interesting to actually be on the ground, to be learning things in real time, finding out the kind of struggles that they have, finding out the ways in which they work with the platforms, utilize the platforms, how this emerging sector of the economy is unfolding, and the issues that it might be creating in our society as well. Another side to the PhD that starts to become available to you from year 2 onwards is that you start to adopt the academic lifestyle. You start to go to conferences, you start to live in the same way an academic would. I actually went to my first academic conference in Lisbon, Portugal at the end of my first year, and for me it was a really interesting experience. Growing up, my family had 1 holiday a year, and it would be all of us getting into a car and driving from our home in Nottingham all the way to somewhere in the north of Spain, and camping for 2 to 3 weeks in the north of Spain, and then driving back to England. So the academic lifestyle is quite different to that, and going to this conference in Lisbon, Portugal was in some ways a bit of an intimidating experience for me also. Originally, another PhD student who had started at the same time as me was going to go to this conference as well, but he had visa issues, which meant that he couldn't. So I ended up flying out there alone, which was really quite intimidating for me actually. The conference organisers paid for the flight, and they paid to put us up in a nice hotel in Lisbon. Giving my first presentation was a really daunting experience, especially because I was in a room full of people I didn't know, really senior academics, many of them. And actually one of the academics I was referencing quite a lot in my presentation was sat right there in the audience. This academic was hearing how I was going to adapt and build upon their research, and it was really daunting that they were just sat there in front of me. But in the end it went really well, and something about the social sciences in England and in Europe is that academics tend to be quite nice. They tend to be quite chilled out, they tend to be quite relaxed. So they're nice people to be around, they're going to help you, they're going to encourage you, they're going to give you positive feedback on your work most of the time. And after I finished my presentation, I was able to have a couple of days to just explore Lisbon, to see the sights, which was amazing for me because I'd never been there before. Later on into the second year is when I really started to enjoy going to conferences, because I wasn't going alone, I was going with other PhD students in my department. I think every academic will admit that a big part of going to conferences is the social side, is getting to see these amazing places, these amazing cities around the world. Yes, you have to work, it's hard work, you have to present your research, you have to listen to findings, you have to engage with the research community, but it's also a really enjoyable social experience. In May of my second year, a few of us went to this conference in Prague, which was really, really great, really well put on actually. They had free alcohol and free food at the conference, which is a bad recipe, but also really nice. I remember one day me and one of my colleagues and some new people that we just met at the conference decided to leave a little bit early and go find an outdoor pool in the city. It was a really great chance for us to network on a more personal level and really get to know each other, understanding where each person was coming from, their research, why they are passionate about their research, and also just get to hang out with them and have fun with them. The second year is also when I started teaching for the first time, which was the thing I was most nervous about, to be honest. I started teaching on an introduction to quantitative analysis class, which was really exciting but also really daunting. I've never been a maths expert. I'm okay with maths, but it's not my area of specialty, and I was nervous going into that all these students might ask me all these questions that I wouldn't know the answers to, and I'd just be stuck in front of a class looking stupid, essentially. But in the end, it wasn't really like that. And the way that class is taught at LSE, you have two teachers there in the room who are able to help. So if there's any question that you're not sure about, you can always just confer with the other teacher. The summer between my second and third year, I got to go to present at a conference in America on the West Coast, which was super, super exciting for me as somebody who had never been to America, always wanted to go to the West Coast of America. The conference was in Eugene, Oregon, but I was able to get a flight out to LA and then a flight back a few weeks later from Vancouver in Canada. And essentially what I was able to do is have a road trip all the way up the west coast of America, stopping off a week for the conference in Eugene, Oregon. On the way up, I got to visit so many places that I've always wanted to go to, like Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles for a week. I had an amazing time going around seeing all the different parts of the city, meeting up with a few friends I know who live out there, having amazing times on the beach, hiking in the Hollywood Hills. I then got to go to San Francisco, again, another place I've always really wanted to go to. I got to see the Golden Gate Bridge. I got to spend a few days exploring the city, seeing all the sights. And then my absolute dream of all time, going to Yosemite National Park. I was able to spend, I think in the end, 3 days in Yosemite National Park, exploring, going hiking, climbing some of the mountains in Yosemite National Park. It was a really fantastic experience. After Yosemite, I went to the conference in Eugene, Oregon, and I ended up making quite a few new friends there as well, who are still my good friends today. I'd done the part of the journey from LA to Eugene, Oregon by myself, but from Oregon onwards, it was me and 3 of my colleagues from the LSE together doing a road trip. We went up, we visited Portland, Oregon, we visited Seattle for a night, then we drove up to Vancouver in Canada. Again, another new country for me. I'd never been to Canada before, so getting to spend a few days in Vancouver was really exciting. In my third and fourth year, I taught on a course about inequality in the sociology department at LSE, which was a really fantastic opportunity because it was a first year course for new students. So it was also about helping these students adapt from the kind of high school, the A-level type of work to the university environment, and to help them through that first year of their real academic development. Actually, one of the students I taught in my third year, who was at that point first year himself at the undergraduate level, has recently informed me that he's got into a master's at Cambridge to continue studying. So that's like really exciting news for me as somebody who was there to help him when he was first entering the university environment. To see him really succeeding and going on to do master's study is really a great thing for a teacher to hear. I also had a lot more autonomy in terms of how I planned those classes compared to my teaching in the second year. In the second year, we were basically given a worksheet of what we had to go through during the lesson. But in the sociology class, we had quite a lot more flexibility. The readings were prescribed and the general topic was prescribed, but we had the autonomy to come up with activities that we wanted to do, to take the course content in slightly different directions if we wanted to. And so we got to plan out classes, and that was really exciting for me to be doing that. At the same time, I was also doing the PG Cert HE Higher Education Teaching Qualification, which is something you can do alongside a PhD usually. This entails a few things. It involves going to classes with other PhD students and early career academics where you're taught about teaching styles, teaching approaches, pedagogy, how you assess students, how you give students feedback in constructive ways, and you have to produce a few essays around those topics that are also reflective of your own experience as a teacher. For example, an essay might ask you how you have adapted your teaching style over the past year to accommodate students' needs within your classroom. The final assessment that I did for my PG Cert qualification was designing a course from the ground up, a university level module course. Another really exciting thing that started happening when I was in my third and fourth year was we PhD students in my department started self-organizing writing retreats where we would go away together collectively, maybe 8 or 9 of us, and we would rent a villa in Spain or Croatia for a week, and we would use that time to focus on work, that you're away from the usual distractions of your life, meaning you can sometimes focus a bit better on your writing. There's no doubt that this was also a great social experience for us, a really great chance for us to bond with each other, to have a week somewhere where we're together, we're there as kind of a unit of people who are going through the same journey, going through the same process, where we're able to talk about the issues that we're having with our own research and how we might want to go about them, to bounce ideas off each other. So it was really great from that perspective as well. The first writing retreat that we did was at a villa in Spain, in the north of Spain, and it was so beautiful. We had this amazing pool in the villa, so we were able to take writing breaks by dipping in the pool, which was also a really great way to cool down. One member of my PhD cohort was also a really great baker, and he would bake us a loaf of bread every day, which was amazing. The next writing retreat that we went on was in Croatia, and once again we booked a villa with a pool, but we kind of misjudged the time of year and it ended up being very cold, and using the pool was a little bit painful. But it was also a really, really beautiful place in general, and we got to explore, we got to see some of the local area, we got to have dinner by the sea one night, which was really fantastic. The sun was setting and we were having dinner, we were discussing our PhD projects. It was a really great bonding experience for us. Coming towards the end of my PhD was an interesting time in the world. A few things were happening. Coronavirus was starting to become this thing that we were having to take really seriously. So all teaching switched to online teaching, and I had to become an online teacher and learn the skill sets that come along with that, the kind of changes in the way in which you go about teaching content in the online context. I also took up a position at the University of Sheffield as a master's dissertation supervisor, which means that I was the go-to person for lots of master's students to give them advice, guidance, and to help them go through the journey of writing their master's dissertation. At the same time that I was helping master's students finish off their dissertations, I had to finish off my own thesis, and this ended up being quite a lot of work piling on me at the same time. I remember having to mark my students' dissertations the same week that I had to hand in my own PhD thesis, which was unbelievably stressful, if I'm honest. But in the end, I got my PhD done. And I realised that in this video, I've not spoken much about the work side of writing a PhD. I've spoken more about conferences and going on these retreats in different countries. I suppose that's because you kind of in some ways forget a lot of the work, because a lot of the work was me sat in front of a computer and it's not very interesting to remember. One thing that I found really good as a PhD student in the social sciences, and I know this will be different for other types of PhD where you need to be in a lab or that kind of thing, is the fact that in social sciences, a lot of your work is done from a laptop, which means that you can do it remotely. And this is a really great opportunity again for you to travel, for you to be in different places around the world. In the summer between my first and second year of my PhD, I actually spent a month out in Barcelona. I remember every morning I'd get up about 6 a.m, I'd go running in the hills around Barcelona before it got too hot. I'd come home, have a brunch, and then I'd work for about 3 or 4 hours. Then I'd go down to the beach and swim and then chill out on the beach reading academically for another hour or two. Then I'd come home, have dinner, do a bit more work, and that's the day complete. And that was just a really great lifestyle for me for that 1 month living out in Barcelona. Academic life in general tends to be quite flexible. I mean, even when I was teaching, it was often 1 or 2 days a week that I was teaching. I remember in my third year, I was asked to go to Cyprus. Someone was offering me a free hotel room in Cyprus, and I happened to have enough air miles saved up that I didn't have to pay for the flights. The flights were essentially free. And I think I booked it the night before I left, and I was just able to go because I'd already done my 1 day of teaching that week. So I was able to fly out to Cyprus and then just work remotely on my laptop in Cyprus for a week. Those were the beautiful days before COVID-19. A few months after you submit the PhD, you're going to have the PhD Viva, which is terrifying, to be honest. The Viva, if you don't know, is a form of verbal assessment. So you have normally in my case, two examiners who were not from my university, from other universities. These people were experts in the topic that I did my PhD research in, and they read your PhD thesis, and then you have 2 hours in a room together where they interrogate you about it, where they challenge you on parts of it that they maybe disagree with or find faults with, and then at the end they tell you if you're allowed to pass and have your PhD or not, and usually the vast majority of people do pass, but it's a very daunting experience nonetheless, and they can give you corrections as well, either minor or major corrections. Most people get some form of corrections. It's quite rare to pass without corrections. And that brings me to my life right now, which is somebody who has done the PhD and is now in a kind of limbo, actually. I'm still working. I work at the LSE. I'm a Master's Research Supervisor this academic year at the LSE. I'm also a Master's Research Supervisor at the University of Sheffield again this academic year. So I've got those two things going on. But I'm also at the moment looking for more full-time opportunities. So we'll see what happens over the coming months and if I can find anything. The academic job market at the moment is a little bit chaotic. I have applied to 100 jobs so far. I've been shortlisted for 2 jobs, both actually at the University of Oxford. In both cases, more than 120 people applied for each post. I was shortlisted to the final few who were considered, and we had an interview. I just narrowly missed out on both, unfortunately. So still going, still applying, and hopefully something will turn up. Yeah, so that's my experience as a PhD student at the LSE from start to finish, and it was really fun. I would recommend it. There's downsides to it. There's definitely downsides. There's dark days where you're feeling fed up with it. There's dark months where you're feeling fed up with it, but overall, I've made some incredible memories over the past 4 years, and I've had a really fantastic time. I've made so many new friends, and I'm now way more qualified than I was when I started with my PG Cert HE and my PhD. So yeah, there you go. That is my PhD journey at LSE.